Hey, welcome to the series of everything you need to know about Python in simplest possible way. In the series of pattern printings, we have seen so many patterns previously and how we can solve those patterns using for loop, string concatenation and also using string multiplication. In this video, we will be solving this particular pattern using for loop, string concatenation and also using string multiplication. If you don't know about string concatenation and string multiplication, you can watch my first video about pattern printing 1 where I have explained clearly about string concatenation and string multiplication. Having said that, let us go ahead and see how we can print this particular pattern using all these things. So let's go ahead and see. So I want to print this particular pattern, and how many number of rows that we are having in this pattern is 5. So for that I will take a variable rows to 5. Initially, though we have taken 5, we will change this value of 5 dynamically taking input from the user. So having said that, let us go further. So here, if you carefully see here, we have two different kind of spaces here. One is outer space, which is of this. Without this particular spaces before mentioning, we cannot get this particular pattern like this. So for that reason, I will mention a variable outer spaces, and I will mention these outer spaces as rows minus 1. Why I have mentioned rows minus 1 is that in the first row we have one star and remaining 1, 2, 3, 4 are spaces. In the second row we have two stars and 1, 2, 3 are spaces. Like this we are getting the spaces. For that, in the first row we have 4 spaces, which is of how many number of rows? 5 minus 1. For that reason I have mentioned outer spaces as rows minus 1. And we have these inner spaces, right? So for that, I will mention one more variable as inner spaces. So for these inner spaces, what we are doing is that we will be keeping track these inner spaces from this particular row to end of this particular row. First row and last row, we are not considering these inner spaces. Why? I will tell you while we are going through for loop. So for that reason, I will mention 0 here because of the reason in the second row, we have 0 spaces. So let's go ahead and do this particular pattern printing for loop. For that reason, I have mentioned for I is a variable I am taking, in is a membership operator, range, I will be generating a range of values from 1 to 5. So those are number of rows that we are having, right? So for that reason, I will mention 1 rows plus 1. By mentioning this rows plus 1, we will be getting how many number of rows to that particular range. So from 1 to how many number of rows that we are having. So in the for loop, I will mention one condition saying if I equal to 1. So by mentioning I equal to 1, I am mentioning if this I is first row, or if this I equal to how many number of rows that we are having. By mentioning this, I am telling if this row that what I am getting from this I is of first row or of last row, any row that might be first row or last row, what I will be doing is that I will be printing. First, we need to print this outer spaces, right? So in the first row, we have these outer spaces, then only we are getting this star. For that reason, I will mention a space. I will multiply these spaces with outer outer spaces. Later, what I will be doing is that I am concatenating these outer spaces with a single star, not with a single star, but I am concatenating this star with how many number of rows that we are having. So here we are iterating through I, right? So for that reason, I will mention I. So in fact, we can generally print this particular star as it is as a single star, because in the first row we have single star only. But if you carefully see in the last row, we have 5 stars. By mentioning simply a single star, we won't get those many number of stars. So by as I is iterating through these rows, we will be getting these particular 5 stars at the end. So for that reason only I have mentioned this I. So after completing this, what I will be doing is that I will increase, not incrementing, I will decrement this particular outer spaces on each iteration, because if you carefully see here, we are getting this particular outer spaces reducing. So for that reason, I will mention outer spaces minus equal to 1. So by mentioning this outer spaces will be reduced on each iteration. So okay, this condition is okay. So let us see and execute this particular program. So if I execute this, I am getting this particular pattern of 1 star in the first row and 5 stars in the last row. So what we need to do is that we need to generate pattern to print this particular in between star pattern. So for that reason, I am mentioning else here. Why? Because if this condition is failed, if the row that we are iterating is not first and not last, at that time, what we will be doing? Let's see. We are printing as it is outer spaces because we have outer spaces, right? For that reason, I will multiplying this space with outer spaces, and I am concatenating this outer spaces with a single star. So why single star? Because we are having single star. After single star only we are having spaces. So I am multiplying, I am concatenating single star, and also this single star is being concatenating these spaces. So we, to keep track the spaces, we are using a particular variable of inner spaces, right? So for that reason, I will multiply this space with inner spaces. So later, what I will be doing this is that I am multiplying, I am concatenating these inner spaces with one more star here, because at the end we left with one more star. To get this star, I am mentioning one more star at the end here. So after completing of this particular printing, what I need to do is that I need to decrement this outer space with 1 on each iteration. That is what happening in this pattern. So for that reason, I will mention outer space minus equal to 1. So and also one more thing is happening, which is inner spaces are increasing on each iteration. In the first, in the second row, you don't have any inner space. In the third row, you have one inner space. In the fourth row, you have two inner spaces, and if the pattern is increased with 10 or maybe 15, at that time the inner spaces will be increased on each row is increased. So for that reason, I will mention inner spaces plus equal to 1. So now if I execute this, I can able to see the exact pattern that what we have expected above, right? So this is what the pattern, and this is what the pattern that we have got. So I hope you can able to understand this logic. If not, let me explain one more time for you. So here initially we are taking two rows to get how many number of rows that we are having. As we have observed, we have two different spaces. One is before this particular pattern and another one is in between this particular pattern. For that reason, I am mentioning two spaces. One is outer spaces to keep track of the spaces before these stars, and inner spaces to keep track of these spaces in between of these stars. So later I am using a for loop to generate a range of values from 1 to how many number of rows that we are having. In the for loop, I am mentioning a condition to let this particular pattern printing of first and last rows. So if I am getting this first row or last row, I am simply printing those stars with outer spaces. I am decrementing these outer spaces by 1 on each iteration. If this is not true, if we are not getting first row or last row, at that time what we will be doing is that first we will be printing outer spaces, and later we will be printing one single star, and this single star is concatenating these inner spaces. That is what we are having in between of these stars. Later I am printing one single star at the end. So after completing this particular print pattern, later we will be using these outer spaces is decrementing by 1 on each iteration. That is what happening here. This is being decremented on each iteration, and also one more thing is happening, which is of inner spaces are increasing on each iteration. For that reason, I am using this inner spaces plus equal to 1. So now what we will be doing is that we will take input dynamically from the user. For that reason, I am mentioning int because I want integer variable value as input. So I am mentioning input because I want to take input from the user. So I am mentioning a prompt as enter any number. So now if I execute this, so it was asking me to enter any number. If I give 5 here, I am getting the same result that what we have expected. So if I give one more number which may be of 9. So if I give 9, I am getting the same pattern, same similar pattern that what we have expected with the number 9. So if I give number maybe of 15, so if I execute this, I am getting the similar pattern that what we have expected. So by this logic, we can generate this particular pattern with any number given by the user input. So now I hope you can able to understand this particular logic. So in the next video, what we will be doing is that we will print this particular pattern in the next video. To stay updated, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications to all so that whenever I upload any video, you will get the notification. And if you can solve this particular pattern, comment your solution in the comment section. Anyway, we will see this solution in the next video. And if you found this video interesting, hit the like button. And thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.